Welcome beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy. Like countless others, Reiki found me when I wasn't even looking, and then it ignited a whole new world of questions. This podcast explores topics of interest for the spiritually curious. Join me for discussions and special guests on subjects such as past lives, crystal healing, spiritual awakening, ascension, energy healing, and more, all to assist and inspire you along your unique soul's journey. This episode is sponsored by energyhealingwithspirits.com and Gayle Revels. And you'll definitely want to stay for the end of the show when Gayle describes a special offer she's put together exclusively for the BTRG audience. Welcome to Beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy, and Gayle Revels is joining me. And you may remember Gayle, but let me tell you a little bit about her. She's a psychopomp and energy healer who specializes in helping people remove attached energy so that they can regain their sovereignty. She loves to help spirits who have been stuck here or perhaps been causing problems to move to where they belong. And Gayle's unique approach truly helps everyone involved. As I mentioned, Gayle was with us before, and her episode is the most popular show of all time here at the podcast. It was called Spirit Attachments and Curses. And if you haven't listened to that yet, it is a must listen. We'll put the link to that episode as well as a follow-up we did not long after in the show notes and in the video description on YouTube. In that second episode, we share what happened during and after actual sessions with Gayle. It was incredible. You've just got to hear it to believe it. And so, Gayle, I just want to say thank you so much for being here again on the show. And it's going to be a little supersized endeavor this time around. We're going to expand to 2 episodes. And so listeners can get a double dose this time around. And I am so excited to get into this with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's hard to believe that's your actually most watched episode of all time. You have some great stuff on your channel.
Yeah, we've been blessed with wonderful guests. And, I just was so excited, looking forward to meeting with you. But I have to say, when I was putting the bio together, I went over to your website and, we've kept in touch, since the last time you were
Yeah.
on the show. And, I've had another session or two, I will say, after that. And when I saw the word psychopomp on your About Me page, I I didn't even know what that was. I had to go look it up. And so for our listeners, I bet there are a lot of people out there. They don't know what psychopomp is either. So can you explain that for us?
Sure. Psychopomp is the French word of conductor of souls. So it's someone who can help a spirit move from one place to another. And it doesn't have to be humans. We often think of humans, we're fairly human centric, which makes sense. That's what we are in this lifetime. But it can be any spirit helping them move from one place to another. And honestly, that's what a lot of my formal training is in Psychopomp. And it's not a word that I used to use on my website because most people don't know what it is. But the guys were really insistent. Over the course of my career, I've moved from a lot of shamanic training, which I've loved, but didn't really vibe with that as a title, into energy healer, which does feel much better for me. And I'll stick with that. But the guides are really insistent that I call myself a psychopomp. They say that is what I am. And some people who are looking for, how do I get rid of the spirit, which is sometimes what people Google when they find me, psychopomp really is the word for that. And some people know what it is, even if most people don't.
Yeah, I love learning new things. And that's really what that did for me, seeing it on your site, because I had, I think, heard the word maybe once or twice, but just maybe in passing or something. But seeing it there, something just kind of clicked. And I thought, I need to go see what that is. And when I read the definition of it, the exact thing that you just offered here, I thought, oh, that is what she does. I mean,
Yeah.
I understand that it was very important to your guides to have that on your website, because I think that, at least from my perspective, that is your specialty. I mean, from my perspective.
And it's what I love to do. I really do love to help usually non-human things get back where they belong, because they're wreaking havoc here and they're not happy either. So they're unhappy, they're causing problems, and helping them go home is satisfying for me.
Okay, Gail, I can just hear people out there. I can just hear them right now. And they're saying, what do you mean non-human? What are these other spirits that you're talking about? Because
Yeah.
I think that most people, and you said this already, most people think it's helping people cross over to the light or something like that. And that is, I would guess, part of what you do, but my feeling is not a big part, but I don't know. So please expand on that and
Yeah.
share with us more about it.
Yeah. You are absolutely correct. That is a small part of what I tend to do. And I do it with every single client. It is really, really normal to have spirits hanging out. I think almost, I don't want to say this as an absolute because I'm sure there is an exception, but I would say almost everybody has something hanging out in or around them. I think it would be really unusual not to have a single spirit be displaced around us, but they're not bothering us. So I went to the dentist once, asked about my wisdom teeth, and he said, "They're not bothering you. I'm not. They're not bothering me." And I thought it was funny at the time, but honestly, that's really my view of working with spirits. If they're not bothering you, I'm not touching them. But there are an infinite number of non human things. They can be spirits of the land, spirits of the trees, spirits of the water, spirits of the ocean. I think a lot of the things that we learned were fairy tales are actually real in the spirit world. I work with dragon a lot. Dragon is very, very real in the etheric realm. They may not be physically incarnated here, but there are definitely dragon spirits. So you might see any of the mythical creatures as a spirit. A lot of people talk about demons. The Catholic Church, I think, started that many thousands of years ago, where they categorized everything that wasn't human as a spirit. They called it a demon. And so, even though all the other things that are not technically demons, demons come from the Mesopotamian tradition, they really are a thing, but there's very few demons actually here that at least that I've seen or found. It's more than likely something else. When cursing was more, or spell work was more active in more cultures, it's still active in some cultures here in the world, but not very many anymore. They used to use non-human beings as fuel or power for their curse or their spell, and they used to bring things here and then tie them into spells, and so they get stuck here. So they can be anything really. I think it's only our imagination that limits what a spirit can be. But if you look at, say, the animist traditions, and animism, everything has a soul or a spirit. So even inanimate objects in most people's view would have a spirit. So spirit of your desk, spirit of your computer, spirit of anything. And most of the times I'm not working with those. So, but they do exist. But then other types of spirits definitely exist. And a lot of times I'm working with elemental spirits or land spirits. But star beings are definitely a thing. They used to be called in as power, and then they get stuck here. They need a lot of power to get back up into the heavens. Some of the ETs that people talk about are definitely a type of spirit that can be here and they need help moving back into, usually it's a star system or planet that they belong in. So there are things that belong other places in what we consider the physical world, but then there's things that belong in other realms or dimensions that we don't necessarily interact with unless you have a sensitivity to spirit or the etheric realms. Astral plane, people who talk about go being on the astral plane, most people do it in their sleep, although you can do it as an active waking state. That's just another dimension that can include a lot of spirit work.
We hear a lot of times that everything is energy. So if we take that into account, then I guess it makes sense that any of that energy could be where it's not meant to be, right? Like
Right.
you mentioned the energy of the desk, the energy of this, that, and the next. And can you give us some examples of what you've seen that may not be human, that maybe some common things?
Yeah. So for me, in my work, and some people would argue this is a distinction without merit, but in my work, what I'm looking for with a being is something that has a sentience. It can think for itself. It has needs and wants, and um, some animist traditions would say your desk definitely has that. But for me, I'm looking for a being that generally has its own um, body, even if it's an etheric body separate from the object. And a lot of times when I see spirits with clients that aren't human, they a lot of times they're magical beings of some type. I think a lot of our ancestors, if you go back far enough, used to believe in magic more and do more magic. So they're beings with a lot of power that have magic of their own. Um, yes, so the Jinn says I can name them as one of them. So Jinn, Jinn, is a type of magical being, and they were tied into a lot of spells. They were really not treated well by humans who were doing active magic. They're often kind of irritated with humans because they're stuck somewhere they don't belong. So if there's a jinn with you that's tied into a spell, that spell can be really powerful because jinns are really powerful, curses as well. But if they're not tied into a spell, they're just stuck here because there's something that still binds them into the human realm. They're usually angry. So if you're like, things are always going wrong, I have clients that come in that are just like, every time I try and do something, it's blocked. I can't open a business. I can't save any money. I can't provide for my family. We can't keep a house. I've lost 3 houses or had to sell them at a loss. Um, everybody in my family gets divorced. And it's because there's some type of being, and a gen's just one example, not usually tied to divorce, but tied to a lot of those other things. And who they're just like, your family has me stuck here. I'm mad at you. I'm going to make everything. You're going to be as miserable as I am. And and then they're very opportunistic. So it's like, it's always different. They're like, how do you know it's always a gem? It's like, well, I don't really. It's just, and in my intake form, you probably noticed, I always ask people, how's your luck? Are you one of those people that is constantly feels like they have bad luck? And it's because there's a being that's going, yep, you're not allowed to do that. So anytime anything kind of goes well or we're excited about it, they block it or they make it not work. And that's an opportunistic being going, what's going on in your life that I can make you miserable with? And Jinn is one example, but it can really be any. A lot of people will say they have demons. A demon, most people will define as an energy that feels dark or heavy. And if you use just that, call it a demon, that makes sense to me. But most of the time, it's not a demon. It's a being that's stuck who's using our energy to stay here because they're stuck with us. That energy probably doesn't match what their natural state would be. They're usually tied to a task that they don't really want to do. So, especially if they're causing harm, I think most non human things don't particularly want to cause harm. So, if they're being forced to cause harm, and then they're not having their regular energy source, they're getting heavier and heavier, darker and darker. And then they feel like, well, I've done all of this harm. I don't deserve happiness. I don't deserve to go home. And so they just keep doing it, thinking they don't have another option. So if you meet someone like me, my job is to go, hey, what are you? How did you get here? Why are you stuck here? And let's start resolving some of those things. Let's start lifting all the energy that isn't yours. Let's start getting your energy back where it really belongs. And I'm asking guides to do that. Can we transmute this energy? Can we give them more energy, or can we take energy away? Sometimes they're lower energy than us. And then once we start doing that and getting them back into their more neutral state, then you can have a better conversation. Then you can find out what they really are. Sometimes they'll even tell you that they're a demon because that's what we call them. So if we've been calling them a demon for hundreds of years, they're like, well, I can tell you I'm a pixie, but you're not going to believe me. So I'll just tell you I'm a demon.
I just have to say, Gail, I mean, I'm just so I'm overwhelmed with like wow and fascination and questions. I just find it so unique. And you said a minute ago, you said people that do what I do. It's like, uh, I've never run across somebody that does what you do. So there are others.
There are definitely others.
Wow. Okay. So, wow. Okay. So, my first question then is the energy that the beings have. You mentioned that. Are they siphoning off of our energy if they're around us? Or is it more, are there other options?
There are other options. Most of the time they are taking from us at least a little bit, maybe not entirely, but at least a little bit. So that's a really common, like for me, when people come say, what's a symptom of spirit attachment? Unexplained fatigue is probably number one. And it's so easy in the modern world to attribute that to somebody else. I stayed up too late on my phone. I didn't sleep really well. I shouldn't exercise more. I didn't eat well. I'm getting older. And so it's so easy to blow that one off. So, but that probably is still the number one sign. Also, when they are not siphoning our energy as their main primary source, sometimes they're causing a lot of chaos around us. So, if things are going wrong and we're constantly dealing with the chaos, they're actually feeding off the chaos. So, or they're feeding off the pain. If they're causing stuff to go wrong and we're in a lot of emotional pain over it, they can be feeding off the pain, the misery, the chaos, not just us. So, it's still kind of coming off us because we're the one creating the pain or dealing with the chaos, but they're actually feeding off of that energy, not necessarily our life force energy.
I never even thought of that as an option,
Yeah.
but that makes sense. Like an intensity, wherever
And
there's an intensity, then
exactly. So people will sometimes talk about, I think the technical word is phenomenon. So, but that's where doors open and close, lights turn on and off, things move, you hear things. So you're interacting with a spirit in a really tangible way. So whenever they start showing up in the real world, that's called phenomenon in my world. And they need energy to do that. So the fastest way to stop that from happening is just to say, you're not allowed to use my energy. It's a boundary. It's a statement of fact. You're not allowed to use my energy. And suddenly they don't have the energy to do those things. It doesn't make them go away. You still have to deal with them, but at least you're not dealing with slamming doors and flickering lights.
yeah, okay, okay. So the first thing I want to ask you about is I I think I got it. So if they are phenomenon, right? Doors and things like that. If they're doing that, we are aware of them in our world. But is it fair to say that most of the time they aren't making phenomenon happening, but they are there. They're just making
Yes,
other things happen that
exactly.
we don't experience with our senses, our
Right.
five senses. Ah.
Yeah. You're like, why are they mad at me? I didn't do anything. They've just manipulated the other person. Um, why don't I get
Ah.
hired? Why did I get fired? What is going on with, why can't I keep a relationship? People come say, everyone always sees me as really negative. And I don't understand why. Sometimes that's us, right? That's, something we have to work on. Sometimes it's not.
And so with that example, what's happening? They're in our field or
Hmm.
they're around us. But then what's happening if can you fill in that blank for me?
Yeah.
What is happening that we're okay, we're kind of neutral or maybe even positive, but other people are seeing us as negative.
Yeah.
What's happening behind the scenes?
Usually there's something projecting energy that feels like it's coming from us. So if the being's really angry, I'm looking at you, you're like, oh, you're curious, you're happy, you're engaged, but the energy coming at me is anger. And you're like, okay, why aren't they telling me why they're angry? Why are they angry? And you're like, I'm not angry. And I'm like, but I feel anger. And the anger's not actually coming from me. It's my field, but it's the being that's projecting the anger. So you're going, why are you angry? And I'm going, I'm not. And suddenly we're fighting about whether or not I'm angry. but I'm not. And you're like, but that's what I see.
That,
So
yeah, it's so fascinating to me. And then I'd like to ask you a little bit about, unfortunately, good and bad. Because, we have these judgments. We always tend to, it's our human thing, I guess, categorize things or label things as good and bad, and light and dark, and, all of that kind of thing. But I'm thinking, as you're talking, I'm actually sitting here thinking, doesn't everybody have times in their life where they're actually influenced by these kinds of energies?
yes,
I mean,
100%.
yeah, so there's nobody walking around, nobody listening to us or watching us right now. Nobody can say, I've never had a spirit attachment.
I have a hard time with absolutes, but I would be really surprised if there
Yeah,
was anybody that has never been, maybe not an attachment, but impacted by a spirit.
right. Yes.
I think that's 100%. And same thing I would actually say about curses and spells. I don't think there's a single person living that can't say they aren't impacted by a curse or a spell.
Wow.
The
And
question is, how much is it bothering you? And is it yours to do? Some things are on the family line. Like I see curses, I'm female, that run down the male line. So it's like, well, I see it in my brother and my dad, but it's not actually mine.
mm,
So it's like, well, then if you start working with someone like me, can I clear it from your family line? I might be able to, but I might not because it's not yours. I might be
mm,
able to get it because it's in your ancestral line. So you, as a descendant of the line, can say, hey, remove this curse. And sometimes I can do that. But if you're like, hey, my brother is possessed, can you fix my brother? If it's not affecting you, I actually can't touch it. And that's about consent. So I think if we are talking about, who's an ethical provider, there are a lot of people who do this type of work. Some of them aren't legit or are very ethical from my point of view. And I think at the moment people say, hey, yeah, I can clear your brother, that's all sorts of red flags for me. So, but if it's an ancestral thing, maybe I can clear that one thing from your brother because I'm clearing it from your ancestral line and you're the client. But sometimes I can't. So some things aren't ours to do, even though we could see them, feel them, sense them, and some things are. So that's something you would have to play with in a session. Each person would be slightly different.
yeah, when you were talking, it made me think of way back when I've had that first session with you, and then we shared about it on the podcast. And so I'm sure a lot of people listening to this won't even remember that, but um, there was something that happened or something you found in that session, and it explained so much about how or why I would say I chose certain things in my
Yeah.
life. And it was ancestral, there was influence there. And, just to give a little bit more context, I had ancestors that didn't want judgment on the family, that I was out, doing weird things or something. And anyway, the bottom line is it explained to me why I had such a strong feeling, such a strong guidance to be mainstream in what I did.
Right.
And so I just want to put that out there because when I learned that, it wasn't like I thought, oh, that's bad. You
Mhm.
know, it's like, wow, that's who I am. I still have that feeling and I don't see that as a negative, but it
Right.
explained that decision that I've made over and over in my life, to walk a certain road. And
Right.
so, yeah, I guess I'm trying to, in a weird way, get back to the good and the bad and,
The
all
good
of
and the
that
bad.
kind of thing. I just think a lot of these things can help explain and put into context, our
Right.
experience and how we've navigated,
Hmm.
our own life. But I want to underscore what you said a moment ago for people who feel so blocked, like nothing works for them. That
Right.
is That's a huge red flag.
It's
Yeah.
a huge red flag. And so, like I think I've said earlier, fatigue's the number one sign of spirit attachment. When things are out of flow and there's just no reason why, that is number two. So those would be the two reasons that I would say you need to go find someone like me who can go look at the energy that's going on around you. And I don't think that they're good and bad is such a relative thing.
Mm-hmm.
The ancestor that's really worried about the perception of the family, it's good for them to control the perceptions of the family. From us, who feels totally blocked from doing something that might be mainstream today that wasn't 200 years ago, it's a problem. So we would maybe say it's bad that I'm blocked and can't do these things. So is it good or is it bad? Depends on your point of view. I find the same thing with dark and light. I find that, or evil and good, even. I think very few things are truly dark or truly evil. Most things are usually hurt. So there's someplace they don't belong. They have some type of injury or they're stuck. And then they're stuck. They're hanging out with me. I'm stuck. So is that good for me? No. Would I choose it? No. Should I blast them into eternity for harming me? Also, no. So it's like, how do we help them, which then helps us? And which is why, for me, my work is all based on compassion and consent. Those are the two things that go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and they both have to be present. So when I find something with a client, something even that feels really heavy, say even a true demon. So even if we find an absolute true 100% demon, they are assigned. They have a task. There's something they have to do. They report to the old gods. That's what demons are. They're an actual servant of the old gods. So can I just tell them to leave? No. Can I even open a door and have them leave? Also no. They need permission from the god that sent them. So they can get really, really specific, really, really specific. And so learning about the different types of beings and what they need and where they belong and how they get there, and forming enough of a relationship with different types of beings so that whatever shows up, the fact that I mean well, that I will not force them, that I will treat them with compassion, that's in my energy field. And my guides will vouch for me. So even when I meet something new and I don't know anything about that type of being, which for me is really fun, and I love it when it happens, they're like, well, I don't know you. I don't trust you. How do I know? I can say you can talk to any being I've ever worked with. I have never forced anyone in this lifetime. And that's really, really important. It makes it really safe for me to meet anything. I can meet anything in this world. And I know that I have the spirit team that would help me do it. And I have the track record to show that I mean no harm. Even if I can't help them, I won't cause more harm, not on purpose.
Gayle, how do you not, how are you not afraid?
Yeah.
How are you not afraid and so willing to meet anything and things you don't even know? And how do you do that?
It comes with some experience, honestly. But I think for me, really, we talked about this in the other podcast, and you know this about me, but just for context, I've been hearing voices my whole life. And I spent the first 30, almost 40 years of my life trying to make that stop. And when I really started working with professionals, mediums, psychopomps, shamanic people, realizing that everything that I heard, even if it was causing mass angst and trouble for me, never really meant me any harm. And they were always stuck or always needed something. And they were coming to me because they could hear them. So they're like, you can hear me. I need help. I want help. And they used all sorts of different ways of trying to get my attention. And I didn't appreciate all of them. Don't allow a lot of it now. It's through my boundaries and my work. But I always realized that they just needed something from me. Does that mean I have to be available 24/7 to help everything? No, absolutely not. You should have boundaries. Please have boundaries. But it did mean that by paying attention, I could help things, and that felt good. And I still had lots of boundaries about what I was and wasn't allowed to do. But the more beings I met, the more work that I did, the more the guides were like, hey, this is how you fix that, or hey, I'll help you with that. And my team started to grow and my experience started to grow. I realized that one, my guides protect me. So they're not going to allow something that I truly can't handle to be even in my awareness. So, which I thought was kind of interesting. Learning about guides, I didn't see things. We'll take Jen, because I was talking about them a second ago as an example. Jen used to hide from me. And I think I have past lives where I didn't treat them very well. And I had to learn about them in a safe container. I needed someone they trusted to introduce me. I needed to make amends and kind of balance the scales. I need to start building relationships. And then now when a client shows up with a Jen in the works, a Jen will show up to say, hey, there's a Jen here. Let's help you do that. But for the, say, 3 years before that, working full time as a professional, I just didn't see them. The client would show up and I wouldn't see the Jen. They would hide from me. I wouldn't recognize them. I didn't know them. Was it dangerous for me? Probably not. Was it dangerous for them? They thought so. So they hid. And which for me is why I promise not to make anyone do anything. You don't have to hide from me. I won't harm you. I won't force you. But I still don't recognize everything because I don't know them. I started learning about demons in a class 3 or 4 years ago. And after that, every single client for like a month had a demon. And I was like, everybody can't have a demon. They're rare. And some of these, I'm like, I've been seeing this client for 2 years. Why am I suddenly seeing a demon now? And it's because I couldn't recognize them. So, so I think, and they weren't safe for me. So the guides are like, yeah, no, you're not allowed to do that. So now I know if I can see it, if I can interact with it, that I'm either protected, which might be a naive thing, but the guides have always protected me. I feel very, very safe in the work. And I've been saying for years, and I'm finding it to be more and more true, I am never alone. So there's always a team of guides in or around me. There's one in particular that works as a gatekeeper who would be the one telling me, hey, that's not safe. And when he says that, I will immediately do whatever it is he tells me I need to do to make it safe for me. But it doesn't happen very often anymore. I think I had a fallen angel once tell me that they'd been watching me, which kind of freaked me out, honestly. But then once I realized that he meant that, I was building a reputation in spirit for who I am and what I can do and how I work and who my team is. And so they're like, we know you. I may not know them, but they know me, which on one hand is an honor. On the other hand, when they say, we've been watching you, it's kind of creepy.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah. And
That
for
one
you,
freaked me out.
yeah, for you to say that, it's like, oh, okay. Um, I want to just point out how very rare, at least in my world, it is that somebody has a relationship with their guides like you do. The trust that you have, the knowledge, I was going to actually say the word faith, but it didn't feel right for me to use that word. It's just a trust and a knowing. That's how I would say it anyway, from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But wow. And we are going to take the listeners in more into that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to, part of why we're doing these 2 episodes together is to lay this groundwork. And then we're going to help people find sovereignty, find a voice, get more empowered. Correct?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
You say trust and I say friendship.
Yes. Yes.
We have built a friendship, and friendship takes time. So no matter, if you think of just humans, you meet someone, you think, I really like this person. Are they instantly your friends? Maybe friendly, but would you trust them in a dark alley in the middle of the night? Probably not. At least I hope not. The But once you spend a little bit more time together, you start building that level of trust. And I think our guides should be our friends. And should is a word that's a trigger for me. It always makes me stop and think about that when you say it. I think it's very rarely true. But I think our guides can be our friends if we let them be. And we should know them and trust them the same you would as your really close friends. And do they have to be? No. You can leave them up on a pedestal and treat them as a god or a goddess. They are sometimes gods and goddesses, but they want to be our friends. And I think if we don't bring them down into that really trusting friend level, you're really missing an opportunity, which is why I still think that they should be our friends, even though I very rarely say that word.
Yeah. When you were talking too a few minutes ago about your relationship with them, what sort of I envisioned in my mind is it almost seems like, how we just operate in the quote unquote real world,
Hmm.
and we go to meetings and we meet people on the street or meet somebody for lunch or whatever it is. And also, we network, we get to know who does what and what they're good at. And, oh, I need a plumber, I'm going to call them. And to me, it seems like that's very much how you operate. It's just in this spirit, the unseen world, I guess is what I'll say, unseen to most people world,
Yes.
where it's a whole nother world that's just very, maybe much like the one we're used to. Is
Yeah,
that right?
I would say that's true. And, most of those contexts, the people you see in a meeting, the plumber you call to fix your house, they stay polite, they stay professional, but they also stay really superficial. So it's
Oh,
like, would you, if you run into their plumber a week later on the street and they introduce you to their wife, you're polite, but it's still very superficial.
right.
Um, but like for me, my guides, they're the plumber you met on the street, that you then met their wife, that you then realized the kid was in your kid's school, the that you suddenly start having barbecues with, the ones that you call just because something weird happened. It's kind of fun to ask them about it, and they become a friend. So is every unseen spirit in the universe my friend? Absolutely not. But I have a set of friends that are always there, that I trust.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That just must be incredible on a daily basis. I mean, I'm trying to imagine what that would be like for you. Now, and can you I know the answer to this, I think, but, could you share how you interact with them? What your gifts are?
Yeah. So I'm very auditory, which I was kind of alluding to earlier. Things are always talking to me, but I'm also very clairsentient. I feel a lot of energy in my body. Clairsentient can be empathy. Empathy is a knowing of emotions. I think clairsentient is really a more physical, includes empathy, but like with clients who are with me, if I set sacred space, so it's just the client and I can feel where the beings are in the client's body in mine. So I was like, okay, I can tell you have at least three beings. I feel one here, here, and here. And it speeds things up for me, because there's just a knowing that's going on through a physical sense. Claircognizance is that just clear knowing. It's that knowing the answer. So those are probably my three strongest gifts. I'm really not very visual, which is clairvoyance. I'm really excited when I get a visual, but for me, it's generally a really fast snapshot, if anything at all. I can go days without seeing anything. So yeah. So my main primary gift is probably hearing, but my body would be a very close second.
I just have fun, I think, just trying to imagine that, but you've been at this for so long as well. Um, I'm wondering, can I ask you for maybe an example? Just one client example, and then I want to ask you about some client stuff, maybe. But what about an example of somebody's just blocked up and
Oh,
it's very common, And
Yeah.
I think so many people can relate to that.
Yeah.
Things just aren't working out. They've tried everything under the
Hmm.
sun, and then here they show up for a session with you. Yeah. Can you give us an example of what unfolded?
Definitely. That's an easy one to do. So I work with a lot of people who are gifted in my practice. I think that if you're not already doing some type of energy work, I'm not on people's radar. You don't A normal person off the street doesn't go, "Hey, do I have a spirit attachment?" But if you are maybe studying Reiki already and you're really wanting to open a Reiki practice or maybe a mediumship practice, those are probably the two most common ones in my practice. You're like, I know I can do really powerful mediumship. It work comes up with clients all of the time, that are private. Like maybe it's another person in class or a friend of the family or one of my best friends, but I can't open a business doing mediumship. Whenever I try to post things online, nobody sees it, or the technology doesn't work, or I try and rent an office and it doesn't work, or I tried to get a Google Voice number that should be really easy, and I can't. It just doesn't work. The A lot of times when start talking about the gifted and being public about our gifts, it's a type of I tend to categorize them as like a witch's curse. So at some point, somebody said, "Hey, it's not safe to have gifts in public." And maybe it's ancestral. Maybe our family was gifted around the time of the witch trials. And some parent went, I don't want my kids to show any gifts in public. And they had a really legitimate reason for doing that. And so they make an intention that says, hey, I don't want my kids to show any gifts in public. Well, a curse for me is really just made up of three parts. It's an intention. It's, hey, I don't want my kids to show gifts in public. It's a target. Oh, I just said my kids. So what makes it not an intention or a wish for your family and makes it binding, which is a curse or a spell, is power. So do they put some energy behind that? I don't want my kids to show gifts in public. And my ancestors go, yeah, that is not safe. My primary helping spirit goes, yeah, that is not safe. The spirit that tends my house, because most of us have one, says, yeah, that is not safe. Well, now I just put a whole lot of energy behind that. So now it's 10 generations later. Kids have kids. Their kids have kids. The kids in the family are still not allowed to share their gifts in public. And there's a whole lot of energy behind that. So you're like, in private, I'm a powerful medium. I try and open up a business and I cannot do it. Block after block, thing after thing. Those blocks are usually opportunistic. It's whatever the spirits around us come across. You're like, okay, I can't get a Google Voice number. I'll do it via email. And your email provider says, nope, we don't allow that kind of business. It's not. Or PayPal will say, nope, you can't collect money for that type of business. And you're like, why can some people do it and some people can't? And you end up coming to someone like me going, I know I'm a powerful medium. Why can't I open a business? And I go to my guides and they're like, oh, there's an ancestral curse. The kids can't show gifts in public. And so then that's what needs to get unwound is that intention, which has all this power behind it. So that you're like, I can do it privately. Why can't I do it publicly? It's probably one of the most common blocks around practitioners who are like, I just can't start a business. Another sign of that would be like, I have all this fear about people being able to see me as different. Why can't I be seen as different? And it's could be a curse or an intention around perception, like the one we talked about with you. But it could also be maybe there's a human ancestor that's hanging out, helping each generation. They're not fully crossed over. And so they're helping from their point of view. And from their point of view, when they were alive, that wasn't safe. So they're hanging out with you going, are you sure? That's kind of scary. There's a whole lot of fear there. You're like, that fear doesn't feel like me. Why is there so much fear here? And I was like, oh, you have an ancestor hanging out with you. They're scared. They're tied into your energy body. They're using your energy to stay here and stay active. They're scared. You're scared. They're in your energy body. It's another really common example. And that's where I probably do the most around human psychopomp is human spirits that for whatever reason didn't cross back into the spirit plane at the end of their incarnation and they stayed. And when they stay, they have to borrow energy to stay. And whenever they want something or they feel something, we feel it. They're in our energy body. And if there's one of them, it's not usually too bad. Sometimes it can be, but usually it's, this kind of feeling in the back of the head, or they're giving advice. That's how they're trying to help. And unless you're really auditory and can tell where things came from, that advice feels like us. It's in our energy body. It's that nudge or intuition to do or not do something. We're pretty logical people, humans. So if I have two thoughts in my head, one is do it, and the other is don't, I might pro and con it and make my choice and off I go. The problem is when there's a group of them. So maybe there's 20 ancestors that hang out in and out of the line. They move around. They're not always with me. Sometimes they're with my siblings, my parents, my cousins, but there's maybe a big choice or something going on in my life. So suddenly all 20 of them show up. I'm going to help you. Well, I have 20 thoughts in my head, and I'm even more tired, which I might not notice because there's already a lot going on in my life. And if you put 20 people in a room together, the odds of them all agreeing with each other, slim to none, right? So now I have 20 thoughts in my head. They don't all agree. I can't tell which one's me anymore. They all feel like me. They're in my energy body. That decision paralysis, brain fog, I don't know feeling. That's human. Sometimes that's us, but sometimes that's too much help. And that's what really happens when people have too many humans hanging out, even those that are helping. If they're not helping, has a different set of problems. But most of the time, I think they're actually trying to help.
I cannot tell you how many times I have had somebody, we're talking, and they're like, I need clarity. I don't know what to do,
Yeah,
and so you're talking, saying this, and I'm just imagining all of their ancestors,
yeah,
telling them all of their thoughts and feelings about a certain thing. It's no
exactly.
wonder. It's no wonder. Um, I want to ask you. So, in your example about the practitioner, I just love that example because we probably have so many people
Yeah.
that will hear this, and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, that's me." So,
Hmm.
I thank you for sharing that particular one. That one you mentioned curse, like if there's a curse there.
Hmm.
And so if you find the curse, then what do you do about it? How do you
Yeah.
you use the word unravel, but what does that look like?
For me, the curse is just the energy structure. So most people in the modern world have a real value judgment, good, bad, evil, dark, around curses. And for me, it's just that energy structure. So in that example, that's an example of how curses can be protective. It's a loved one. It just doesn't age well. That really wants the best for us. Curses can also be on purpose to be negative. The best thing about energy work, from my perspective, is that we're not bound to linear time. And so when I say unravel a curse, we're unraveling it from the fabric of time. So generally, I start with a helping spirit. The goddess Freya has offered to do curses with me. She's when I first started learning how to do curses, and when I teach curses, we're always looking for a volunteer helping spirit to work with us on that. She volunteered for me. So when I'm doing curses, I'm asking her, "Hey, can you show me where this begins?" I want that moment in time when someone decided to do it. They put all the components of it together and they've created this little curse ball, but they haven't actually given it to anybody yet. That really, it might be just a brief moment in time where it exists all by itself. And from there, I can start collecting information, which I often share with clients. Where is it in relation to me? Did it happen last year? Did it happen 20 lifetimes ago? Did it happen in the family line? If the family line, which family line? So where is it in relation to me? I also usually want to know some context. So if the curse is you can't show your gifts in public, why did they do that? So it's like, oh, witch trials, not safe, context, right? So, but to undo it, what I'm looking for is those three components. What's the intention? The exact intention, not how is it playing out? Who was it actually targeting? Curses feel personal. They're impacting my life. Of course, the curse is on me, but I'm not always the target. Sometimes it is personal. It's me as a soul that's carrying this curse. But sometimes it's my family. Sometimes it's maybe a group I was in a past life that has the curse. So it's impacting me. It's still playing out through me, but the target is actually the group. And we want to know who the target is, because if I don't undo it, the guides don't undo it. I'm never doing it myself. The guides don't undo it. From the actual target, what happens is that maybe if I undid it for you, say, and it's a family curse, and then you call your sister and go, hey, I had this weird session and we did this thing. It was related to the family. Well, the curse is on the family. You just called your sister. So now you're reconnected to the family. So what I just did for you comes right back because you're part of the family. Curse is on the family. So we want to make sure we get the entire target. And what I'm trying to do with Freya is we're saying, okay, here's the intention. Here's the target. The fuel is the most interesting part for me, but the fuel is always has to do with the person who set it up. So if I was setting a curse, which I don't do in this lifetime, it would be, what do I have access to? And as a professional now, people come to me and say, hey, can you remove this curse? And I remove the power from curses. What I'm doing now is I'm making sure that power is totally clean. If it's just, say, fear, the emotion is, I'm scared for my kids. So my fear is the fuel. I'm just going to transmute that back into pure energy and let it go back to source to be reused. But if it's, say, my ancestor, that's the fuel, then I'm saying, hey, it's time to change this. And we don't want your energy being given to this anymore. Sometimes the ancestors go, yeah, we agree. And they just separate as we start to dissolve the structure of the intention. Sometimes they're like, no, I still want to be tied into this. I still feel strongly about this. Usually I find the ancestors that still really feel strongly about something, they're not crossed over. So I find once the spirit crosses back into the spirit plane, they get a little bit more distance. They don't have as strong of a personal opinion. They can see the bigger picture. They're not tied to only their lifetime. They can see, in this lifetime, it's different. When they haven't crossed over, they're still really tied into the life experience of that lifetime. So it might be, we need to help this ancestor cross back into the spirit plane. And then they don't care anymore. So, or if it's a spell, we want to undo it, a spell that ties a different type of being. So if we undo the spell, it releases the being. Anything that I find that's alive in the fuel of a curse has sentience of its own. We're helping it go home. And whatever it needs to do that will stay and do that, which might have nothing to do with the client per se, except that the client needs the being to leave. So, but we're going to help the beings if the being is the client at that point in time until the client gets to go all the way home. So the fuel is always about the cursor. The cursee, it's really all about the intention. So I would sit with the guides and they'd remove all of the fuel, whatever that is. And don't generally share that with the client, not usually relevant, unless the guides tell me to. Every now and then they'll say, oh no, you need to tell them this was one of the fuels. Usually it makes zero sense to me. Requires a lot of trust on my part to tell a client something totally random. But the guides will hound me. I have to. They will, you must tell them this. And I think the one that broke me of this, I don't remember if I talked about this in the last podcast or not, as had to tell a client that one of the fuels was a clown and a pink hat. And I was like, that is such a random thing to tell somebody. They're going to think I am so weird. I've kind of gotten over that. Happy to claim the weird title. But so I sent this email to the client going, one of the fuels, the clown with the pink hat. And they're like, I've been dreaming about that clown my whole life. And I was like, oh, that's why the guides were hounding me. Like the client needed to know that. So now it's like, all right, I'll do it. Whatever you want. A little nervous about this, but don't get me in trouble. And,
I love that story. I love that story.
So what they're doing is they remove all the fuels and then she takes that intention off the target. She basically starts to unravel it. I think of it as a visual unbraiding it from the fabric of time, from the moment it was created back to today. So if it's ancestral, it comes off everybody who was born from that moment in time to today. If it's on a group, it comes off everybody who was part of that original group. If it's just us, it comes off each of our lifetimes between then and now. And I don't want to leave a hole in the energy work. So I'm always asking them to refill behind it. from the blessing field, which for me is full of universal energy, but it's also full of our helping spirits and our healthy ancestors. So usually people just get energy when we fill in, but every now and then they get something extra, which is fun. I've seen people get some power retrieval, I've seen some spontaneous soul retrieval, but usually it's just energy. So it's kind of how curses get undone.
Yeah, you're so funny. It's just energy.
Just energy. I
It's just
people
energy.
People usually know what Reiki is when they're working with me. I was like, it feels like Reiki. It's golden, it's warm, it's loving, it's supportive.
Yeah.
If you get a bonus, I'll tell you, but it's definitely a bonus. It's not normal.
I think that you could probably write volumes about these kinds of things. It would just be the most fascinating reading, given all that you've seen and experienced and all the different client sessions. And uh, it must be such a learning journey, for you as well, which how wonderful that must be to keep learning, right?
So it keeps it fun. I'm, I know you've probably talked about, I know you have, I've seen the episode where you talk about, like I'm a manifesting generator. So like I have all these different interests. I get bored really, really fast.
Yep.
And I've been doing this now professionally for 7 or 8 years, and longer, obviously, as a student and just as a human being on this earth. And don't get bored. I love
Yeah.
the storytelling aspect of it. And it's fun for me.
Yeah, I relate because I'm that too. I'm manifesting generator too. So,
Yeah.
wow. Um, Given everything that you have seen and learned and your unique body of knowledge, what are you seeing as far as I don't know, I don't really know why I'm asking this question, but have you seen a certain trend emerge in your work? Um, and I'm not even going to try to add anything to that. I think that's enough because I don't
Hmm.
know what the answer is, but I think you
Yeah.
do.
Yes. There's a couple. I think the guides really the work shows up in patterns, which is fun for me to see how the patterns shift over time. I think right now there's a real calling for people to really be public with who and what they are and what they can do. And I'm seeing a big wave of people that where the guides are kicking at them, like, hey, you need to do this. Like the world needs this. With people who already have established practices, I'm hearing, hey, you need to teach, or hey, you need to write. I'm getting the you need to write. I see other teachers saying you need to teach. And they're saying you're not a beginner anymore. Step up, step out of the way. Beginners are needing to come up. You need to step out of that space. And you can do more. You should be doing more. It's time for your work to evolve. And it takes a whole lot of energy and trust and chutzpah to put yourself out there as a practitioner. And we work hard at it. And I say that as a group, not just for me. I work with a lot of practitioners. It's hard work. And when you're like, you finally reach that level of comfort and the guides go, great, now change it again. There's so many people, me included, kicking and screaming, going, I don't want to. I'm comfortable. I'm good where I'm at. Um, Freya told me my birthday's in November, so it's coming back up actually. Last November, you had your year of comfort. It's time. Like step out of this comfort space. And um, I don't want to scare anybody, but for myself in my own personal journey, they will only give me so much time to do it after they've told me to, till they start closing the comfortable route. Um, and I have to do it. And I listen a lot more these days. I've had the difficult route more than once and don't recommend it. If your guides are recommending that you add something, add it. Because what happens, at least for me, and I've seen it as a pattern, is we don't add it and then until you have to. And I think that's a human nature thing. None of us want to change until the change is less scary than staying the same. So if you can take that change in smaller steps and bites, that's a major theme right now. Um, for me, I'll just put it out there. They keep telling me I have to write. I started a Substack with my name, but I never wrote a single article on it. And I have a fear of it for some reason. And it's getting louder and louder and louder. Instead of being, hey, you should write a Substack, now it's, hey, you should write a book. And I'm like, oh my God. And I was like, please don't make me write a book without doing the Substack. They're like, we'll do the Substack. And I was like, all right. So we'll put that out there. I opened one. There's even a few people following it, even though I've never posted anything.
Oh my gosh.
At Energy Healing with Spirits, it's time. The guys are like, you need to do this. So that's mine. I'm guessing most people listening to this, they have one too. So what is the thing they're nudging you to do? What are they kind of pushing at you to do? What's the smallest step you can do for that today? I'll pledge to write at least one article on their Substack before this comes out. What can you pledge to do? One thing that you can do that the guides are nudging you to do. That's probably the biggest theme. The other one that I'm really seeing really loud in the world is the one for practitioners is like, hey, keep going. You can't take that first step, get comfortable and stop, like really loud. The second one is for our clients. And I think that a lot of us are seeing clients where they're looking for that magic pill. They want that one thing, like, are you the one thing that I can do this one session and you're going to clear all problems I've ever had in my entire life, in past, present, and future? And that's not a realistic expectation. And I do see it fairly regularly. I hear it from other practitioners. I'm hearing it from colleagues that I chat with regularly that do my type of work, but I'll also do other types of work. And we're not a magic pill. There's no getting out of doing our own work. And doesn't matter how long you've been doing it or how much work you've been doing, you still have to do your own work. You can't pay someone to clear all of your problems. There are things you do definitely need help with, and they're not saying you can't pay anyone. They're just saying you can't pay everyone and not do your own work. And your own work is going to be different for everybody. Some people it's going to be like, hey, go to therapy. For other people it's going to be like, hey, you should probably exercise some. Or what about meditation or breathing exercises? Or right, we have to do our own work, and they'll help us. They always help us, especially if you ask them to help. Like for me in writing, again, I'm a really clear medium or channel. And if I am actually in the flow with writing, I can sit and write 30 pages off the top of my head because I'm just channeling. And I would say, oh, I'm just a channel. I'm not actually a writer. But I just wrote 30 pages. So, but I'm channeling. They're saying, hey, we'll help you write the book, but they can't help me do something I'm not actually doing. If I sit and write, they'll channel with me. It's not that bad. If I'm not writing, it's backing up in me. And that urge to write is getting stronger. The fear of doing it is also getting stronger because I'm not actually doing it. So the fear, the urge, pardon the metaphor, the energetic constipation is growing. And they're like, I was like, can you clear that? I feel heavy. They're like, no, write. It'll come out when you write. We're not clearing that until you write. Writing is the clearing. And I'm like, they're pushing, pushing, pushing. And I see that with a lot of people. So kind of those are the themes. It's like, hey, there's no avoiding your own homework. And we should constantly be evolving, changing, growing. What's the edge that you're avoiding? Maybe you're a little scared of. Maybe you think you don't really have to. Maybe you're like, no, I'm comfortable here. I finally made it. I'm going to stay here for a while. They're like, yeah, no.
I can so relate to both of those things that you mention,
Mm-hmm.
personally, but also that's what I'm seeing too. When I
Yeah.
interact with people and see my mentoring clients or just talk to students and just
Mm-hmm.
in conversation, this is, I couldn't agree more. As a matter of fact, I am telling you, it was last night that I was checking my YouTube channel
Mhm.
for the comments, And so I just was checking, and I don't answer all the comments. I'm sure I don't see all the comments, but I happened, to see this one. And there was a person on there, and they asked me, they said something about, um, you know, um, come on, Andrea, Reiki can do anything. Uh, and he said, so would you just make one video that heals everything
Exactly.
and be done with it or whatever? And then we could all just use that one. And I thought, wow, magic wand time. You say magic pill, and my term is magic wand. And it's
Yeah.
like, but what would the point be?
Right.
Why would we even be on Earth then if
Wouldn't
we
life be
didn't?
boring?
It would be so boring. Stay tuned for part 2 of our conversation with Gayle, releasing November 6th. As a special thank you to our listeners, Gayle has graciously extended an exclusive offer. Visit energyhealingwithspirits.com and use the code BTRG25 at checkout to receive a $25 discount on your next session or class. Don't miss this opportunity to embark on your own healing journey with Gayle's guidance. Until next time. Thank you for listening, and you can check the show notes or visit the website beyondthereikigateway.com to find out more about the podcast and connect with me. Please keep in mind that views and opinions expressed in the show don't necessarily reflect those of the podcast or anyone affiliated with its production or advertising. This program is presented for your entertainment only, and all information provided is to be utilized at the listener's own discretion. I, along with the BTRG team, hope you enjoy the show as much as we enjoy making it for you. Wishing you highest blessings until we meet again beyond the Reiki Gateway.